All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday. We've got a lot of you jumping in here, so really excited to have a great group on this morning. So come on in, join us. We've got some really great stuff to cover. First, I want to welcome the fabulous Mike Golden, who's sitting in a conference room around the corner from me with a very good saying right behind you. I love it, the word opportunity, because I think we're all in agreement, at least as we've been talking about really wanting to embrace what we are going to have coming August 17th as a really great chance for opportunity for all of us. Tom Downing, hello, the fabulous Tom Downing also joining us this morning, and Thad Wong, who is out of his office at Goose Island. So good morning, everyone. All right, so we also wanted to say thank you and good morning to all of you for, really just sort of taking the time. I know it's a Friday morning, bright and early. We have a lot of really good and important stuff to get through today. So I wanted to just kind of give you an understanding of, really sort of what this next maybe 45 minutes to an hour is going to encompass. Because we know there's a lot of big things coming for August 17th, and our goal is to make all of us, even if we're still a little bit nervous about the fact that something different is going to happen, to feel really confident about where we're going as a team. So, we are going to take you through an overview of the changes that you're going to be seeing to our listing agreement and our exclusive buyer broker agreement. We are also going to take you through two of the addendums. There is going to be one for the listing agreement and one that many of you are actually already using for the exclusive buyer broker agreement when you're writing an offer with a buyer. So we're going to take you through those changes. Here's the thing. I do know that a lot of you asked to have the forms so that you could follow along with us this morning. Doing this on Zoom, I think there's only so much that you can get sitting across from us on the screen. So keep in mind, this is going to be more of an overview, but we are going to have plenty of opportunity for you in your local offices and in a much more of a training, longer format with Kevin Rines and some of our managing brokers in the upcoming weeks. So you're going to have plenty of opportunity to get really comfortable with these forms. The goal today was to take you through some of the new things that we've outlined for commissions and fees, and making sure that you feel really comfortable with what these forms look like. The other thing that I wanted to just share with all of you is that we've turned off the chat. You can certainly say hello to us in the chat, but what we wanted to accomplish here was being able to get through all of this information. We know that questions are going to come up, but we also know how hard it is to try and answer everyone with such a large audience here in the chat. So we just ask that if you've got questions, we're going to do a couple of things. After today, you this afternoon are going to receive a recording of this webinar. You can watch it again. The other thing you're going to get with that recording, you are going to get a copy of these forms with the changes that we're going through. And then lastly, what we have compiled is a really comprehensive group of FAQs that will probably cover a good majority of the questions that are coming up in your mind as you sit with us today. So keep in mind, we know we've been in conversations with lots of you. And what we want to make sure of is if you do have any burning questions, yes, we have the answers. So what I encourage you to do is to take really great notes today, and then look at all the resources. And if after that, you don't feel like you've got all of your questions answered, or you're so worried about a few things, then certainly feel free to reach out to us. Okay. So I kind of wanted to start today's conversation. I'm actually going to stop the share for now because we aren't going to use our slides for a little bit. And then you get to see these fabulous faces a little bit bigger in life. But I thought it was important for us to first start off just talking about the NAR settlement, right? Because I think there has been a lot of stuff that we've had to work through over the last 6 to 9 months as we've gotten information about, the NAR lawsuit, the settlement, and how it's going to impact ultimately the way that we're doing business. And I think one of the biggest things that we want to think about is that there is going to be a change in how we're having conversations with our buyers and sellers. But what I want to acknowledge is that as we've been waiting for August 17th, one of the things that you all have done incredibly well, and this is what we've talked about, is moving forward when we're sitting down, particularly with our sellers, we talked about maintaining our commission level at 5 and 6%. We also did, as a group, a phenomenal job of talking to the seller about why it was so important for them to consider cooperating and offering a cooperating commission to a buyer's agent, right? Because let's face it, up until now, until August 17th, as a buyer's broker, we didn't have anything in writing that truly secured that we could get paid. So we were still relying on the responsibility of a seller and a listing agent to help take care and ensure that we got compensated. So I want to say kudos to all of you, because I know in talking with Tom and all of the managing brokers, it wasn't always easy. There were a lot of you that had a lot of super challenging conversations with sellers, and it was them not always understanding, why do I still need to offer something to a buyer broker? So, congratulations. And I think it kind of represents who we are as a company, but who you are as agents, full fee, full service, but really recognizing, what you do and the power of collaboration with your colleague. So now I think what's going to be the most interesting thing is moving forward after August 17th, there truly is a mind shift. And I know I've had one-on-one conversations with a lot of us, because really what we're doing and what has been required due to the NAR settlement is the DOJ wants to make sure that we decouple, which means what they want us to do as agents is they want to make sure that when we're sitting down and talking with a seller, we're focusing on what we're doing for them and having a conversation on compensation with them. What they also wanted is for us to do the same thing with a buyer. So it's truly what is being referred to as a decoupling of compensation. So as we're moving forward, and I'm kind of setting the stage right now, because as we go through the forms, this is how we're going to have to think. Up until August 17th, there was an old way of doing business. We as a listing agent asked for compensation, and then also planned on sharing it or cooperating with a buyer's agent. Now I want you to think about the idea that this is truly split. When I go in and I have a conversation with a seller, the conversation is about what I'm going to do for them as a listing agent, and I'm going to talk to them about what my fee is, what my cost of doing business is when they work with me. And we're going to talk through what that looks like and what the form looks like. Now, it doesn't mean that a seller can't choose to offer something if they don't want to, but the reality is your focus is on what you're doing for the seller. And we also want to keep in mind, without going too crazy into this, that moving forward, I also want you to think about the idea that your fiduciary responsibility for a seller is to make sure you are getting them the best offers for their property, for them to get the best terms. And so focusing on what you're doing for them and really focusing on your side of it, and no longer worrying about what the buyer's brokerage fee needs to be. And I know that's a little scary, but here's why. Because now in this new age and this new way of doing business, all of us as buyers brokers, guess what we now have to do, right? We now are responsible for sitting down with our buyers, very similar to the dialogue that we've had with sellers for years, to sit down with a buyer, talk to them about what I do, talk to them about what my professional fee is, and explain to them that they have the responsibility to get that paid. And that is memorialized now in agreement, a written agreement, just like we've done for sellers for so long. That exclusive buyer broker agreement is our written agreement and commitment to work together. And in that commitment, that's where your compensation of 2.5% gets memorialized. Now, that means that the buyer is responsible to work with you to make sure that you get paid. There are ways to do that. And one of the ways that you are going to see, and what we're seeing in Indiana right now firsthand, is that buyers agents are working with their buyer's broker. And when they go ahead and submit an offer, part of the terms of the contract have an addendum where the buyer and the buyer's agent are requesting that the seller cover that 2.5%, that 3% that was agreed upon between a buyer and a buyer agent, that that fee or compensation gets covered by the seller and it becomes a negotiated part of the contract. But there are other options for a buyer to basically be able to cover your fee. So, and again, I'm not going to get us too into the weeds here because everyone knows I can do that because I love to coach and train. But I just want us to start thinking about that, right? So our dialogue, our conversations are really being decoupled and are separated. And I think it's really important for us to think about that as we look at these new forms and start getting comfortable with the conversations that we're going to be having with our sellers and our buyers. Because the thing that I think is so critically important to know as well is we aren't the only ones that are having to do this. This is an industry-wide change, right? So our competitors are having to kind of get comfortable with the same language. Every agent is going to have to get a buyer broker agreement signed with their buyers. Every person is going to have to sit down and have the same conversations with their sellers. So we know it's new. We know it's a lot to take in. And here's the thing, we're going to fumble a little bit. The first time you go out and you do this with your sellers and you have conversations with your buyers, if you haven't done it yet, yes, it's a little nerve-wracking, but just know, just like anything, the new norm will become the old norm soon enough. So we just need to, really work together. And, I think the most important thing is myself, my team, Tom, the managing brokers, Mike and Thad, our goal is to continue to help you be as successful as possible in selling real estate and supporting you. And the only other thing I'm going to add before I know Tom has a few points to throw in, I talked to an agent, I think it was last week. And she sent me a note via text. And she said to me, is this NAR lawsuit settlement a national thing or is it only in Illinois? Now, I know we all probably think that's kind of crazy and laughing. And she even said, I thought it was national. And I said, yes, this is something that's happening across the board. But what she had said is that she spoke to somebody who was a friend of hers in Florida, and they had no clue what was happening. Their brokerage firm hadn't given them any insight, hasn't shared any information about what is happening. So it made me feel a whole lot better that while we don't have all the answers and we aren't totally perfect, I feel like we're doing something right to try and get all of us ready and comfortable as we move forward on August 17th. So anyway, so Tom, I know you had a few things to add beyond that.
Yeah, no, one of the things I wanted to say is that I'm going to talk about it as well. But if you look over Mike's shoulder, the opportunity is definitely the theme for all of this. Over the last few months, when that ruling came out, we were hearing a lot from our managing brokers. We were hearing a lot from the agents. We had a lot of concerns about how this was going to come down the road. I just want to do two things. One is say that At Properties has always had our backs. I remember being an agent, and when COVID came out, I was an agent selling at that point, and we were all so nervous. I remember I had a lot of listings. I let a lot of buyers all cancel on the same day when that all took place, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have no idea where this is going to go. That was a really scary time. And one of the things that took place was that Mike and Thad, Amy and Kevin came on, and they started talking about, and I'll never forget this. Thad said, I want you all to put on your jacket. I want you to shower. I want you to shave. I want to show up for the Zoom. And as an agent, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the best thing that ever happened to me, because I remember it very well, sitting there thinking, okay, we are going to get through this. The same thing's happening here. So I also want to give a huge shout out to your managing brokers, because all of the forms and the things that we're going through today, we have had a lot of meetings, a lot of teeth gnashing, a lot of ways that they represented you to make sure that these forms came out with two things. One, that they were easy to understand. Two, that we could communicate them easily to our customers. So it was not an easy process. It was a process that we are building a plan as it takes off down the runway. I used to work for Pat Am, it's right there. And I think one of the things that we just need to realize too, is that as we go through this, as Amy said, everybody else is going through the same thing. We're doing this as we get through it. There will continue to be changes. There may be changes again in the next few months as the DOJ comes out with rulings as we do this. It's just the opportunity about being flexible, keeping an open mind as we go through this today. We're going to be doing a little bit of a 10,000-foot view of the reviews of the forms themselves. We're just going to go, what are the differences and the changes? You're going to have lots of opportunities to dig in this further. We're going to talk about some of the training that's coming down the road at the end of this call, but I just want you to know that you're in very, very good hands. And if you get an opportunity, do thank your managing broker. They've spent a lot of time really making this work for you.
Okay, cool. And I would like to take some time, but also I want Mike to chime in, because we've got a bit to say. First, I do want to recognize Amy and Tom and the rest of the team, the entire company, because we understand how our competitors locally are and where they're at with this, and we're by far ahead of this with forms, with plan, strategy, rates. We've established everything, so we have a full game plan, and I'm super grateful for everyone for putting that together. Number two, I want to thank you for being here this morning. It's Friday at 9. There's one other person in the office but me on this floor, which always drives me a little cuckoo, but that's the way it is today. And but you guys are here. And I just want you to understand, like, I remember exactly what it felt like in all situations with buyer representation and listings. I never forget my, the celebrations, but I never forget my greatest disappointments when it comes to being an agent, which does come with challenges. So I want you to know how much I appreciate you personally for being here and leaning in. The big piece, Tom mentioned it, that I love about this is we all have the same rules. Nobody has an advantage over anybody else in dealing with this situation. That always gives me a sigh of relief, allows me to breathe, and it allows me to create my own strategy to win. And I always felt like that. If everybody has the same rules and it's not about something physical like dunking a basketball, I should be able to do this. The other piece too is, and I'll have Amy send this out, I always save the 1,000-watt surveys and reports because I think those guys in Portland are really bright. And I read them. And they have always been right for the last 20 years. We've been working with them a long time. But they did some surveys. I sent this out just to remind you guys on what you're dealing with. When they did a survey on buyers that worked with agents, buyers gave an 8.2 out of 10 in their satisfaction. 84.4% of buyers did not consider buying without an agent. Okay. And that's before. That's when you could ride around with people and not have an agreement and maybe not even work with them or work for at the same time and keep it a secret and give fake names. And believe it or not, prior to this requirement, 63.4% of buyers did sign buyer agreements in America. Now, some of them, for instance, in Atlanta, signed them right before closing because the agent never enforced it. But over 63% did sign it. So this is not a foreign affair. But in what the DOJ is trying to solve, 50% didn't understand how they were getting paid. Okay, the consumer just didn't get it. So this other piece that we're going to deal with is there will be this period of disorder, right? Maybe it'll be 2 months, maybe it'll be 4 months, maybe it'll be till the end of the year. But we're going to deal with a lot of buyers that are wondering what they have to do. Short story, a buyer called me trying to get my interpretation of a couple of agents from App Properties and who they should work with. And in my conversation, I said, well, you're going to have to, I could anticipate a buyer I had worked with before in life, which is that uncommitted buyer that's not a great person. And I said, well, each of them are going to ask you to sign a buyer agreement. So you're going to have to make a commitment to one. And he said, those things are easy to get out of. I don't need to, and so there is, I understand and I hear you. There are those people out there. I just want to remind you, though, that they are the anomaly. You've worked with a lot of buyers in the past, and most of them have become friends, and most of them you stay in contact with. So the majority of people are good people, but we are going to have those, kind of freaky deakies that are difficult or non-committal. So that is the reality of what we're going towards. And, my last kind of like story that I want to go through is Redfin. And when Redfin came to town, there was a major freak out. Why? Redfin was offering to list properties for 1%. They had by far the best user experience online, and I still think they do. And for some reason, Evanston comes to my mind because I think I was in Evanston at the time dealing with Michael Thomas and a lot of the other agents that were concerned because they were going to go up to Redfin. We created this entire book. We created, getting what you're worth. We did all these things. I call it over-prepared for Redfin. And Redfin was ineffective in our market. Not saying that once in a while you don't come across them, but across America for the last 14 years, Redfin was willing to take listings for 1%, rebate buyers cash back if they bought with them, and they had the best platform online. They never succeeded. They still don't make money, and their home market of Seattle, it's still 3.6% market share. They're a nothing burger. And so they've been offering this service with a discount for 14 years. So I just want you to remember that in your head too, when you're feeling insecure about what you charge, when you're afraid to have the conversation with the buyer, just remember that the buyers have already made their decision. They don't want to work with an agent from Redfin that's giving them 60% of the cash back. They chose that. They chose you at the end of the day. And at that challenge there, we won. So I feel like to some degree, a lot of the anxiety, even though feelings are hard to put out the flame with logic, but a lot of that can get put out with logic here, as long as you guys lean in with us and work on your process.
And, you know, as we said, you know, as we've talked about before, I don't think I've ever sat and been quiet that long either. So buckle up. I'm going to be a while. Excuse me. You know, we've weathered a ton of storms. I mean, change sometimes is scary, but change is what creates opportunity. And, you know, we've said this a number of times today, but we're going to keep reiterating it, that this change, while we're going to have a variety of changes that we're going to take you guys through right now. And we have spent a ton of time talking about this. So I know we've got a lot of questions for people saying, hey, what are we going to do about this? Just so you know, our team, Amy, Tom, our whole leadership, managing broker team has spent a ton of time trying to make sure we found the right solutions. But we've weathered the market crash in 08 and 09. We've weathered Redfin, we've weathered COVID, we've weathered so many different things over the years. And we've every single time found an opportunity to take advantage of those changes and to build market share and for you guys to build your business. And we're going to continue to do that with you now. So we're going to roll out, I mean, Amy and Tom have a lot to roll out. Again, we're going to be as brief as possible because this is like 10,000 feet and you're going to be doing this with your managing brokers and at a much more detailed level. But to try to take you through a lot of the standards and the fees and everything that's changing now so that we can really like attack the new normal. And we just want you to know, like, this is going to be a fluid process. It's been fluid. A few months ago, we said, listen, we're going to stick to our 5 to 6% commission because we think that's the right thing to do. We're going to sit back and watch and see what happens. Now things are changing. And the good news is in Indiana, we've gotten to see in real time how things rolled out. That, you know, in the first few days, everyone was calling, asking what the co-ops were going to be, trying to get stuff in writing. Listing agents were going crazy, answering a million phone calls. It just didn't work. And so now they've gotten into the much more the new normal, as Amy noted, where you're just getting you're negotiating your fee at the time of contract from the buy side. And it is a lot easier and a lot more transparent. But there are going to be changes that are going to continue to happen. And we want you to know that as a company, we will continue to adapt. We are watching this on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis, constantly seeing what our competitors are doing, what the market is doing, what consumers are doing to make sure that we will always be competitive. And we want you to know that we are setting some standards because we think it's important. We have to have that. But we are not going to allow you to not be competitive in the market ever. Because if you're not competitive, we're not competitive. We are successful together. But we also want you to know that we're not going to allow you to be competitive by being cheap. We've never been the cheapest game in town. You know, as Thad noted, Redfin has been out there for 14 plus years, and anyone could have gotten a huge discount, but people didn't choose that. Who's number one on the market? We are. And we're a full service firm. And we've always charged a fair fee. We're not going to try to charge an unfair fee, but we're going to make sure that we're charging a fee so that you're getting paid what you need to get paid to be able to run your business. And remember, like, the vast majority of the money that comes in goes to you. So our goal and our job is to make sure we protect your income. And that we can continue to maintain the services and the resources that we provide to you so that you can continue to deliver that high level of service. We really don't think that commissions are going to go down when it's all said and done. In fact, there may be an opportunity for you guys to make some more money as things go through, but we do think that the structure is going to change, and we have to make sure we continue to adapt to that structure. And just remember, you know, we're going to be watching, and we know that if we have to adapt to the market, and we will, we can always go down, but it is almost impossible to go up. So for us, we want to set a fair standard because we're the market leader. We don't control the market here, but we are the market leader. People will look to us for what we're going to be doing. But beyond that, we can set our standards because we're going to deliver the best service. You guys are going to deliver by far the most value out there. And we're going to make sure that we're competitive no matter what. And again, just remember, this is all about your compensation. You know, there will be a deal that someone won't get because someone's going to do it cheaper, but that doesn't mean they're going to do it better, because in the end, we're very efficient. Our industry is very efficient. And if people start cutting back, they're going to have to cut back resources and cut back service. We don't think that's what's going to happen. And we believe in you. We're going to be here to support you. And we're going to make sure that we're all successful together. Now, I know Amy and Tom want to go through some of the forms and some of the changes that we're implementing. And again, as they said, if you guys have questions, while we can't necessarily answer them all now because the chat would be overwhelming, please send them in to us. We'll make sure everyone gets an answer to any questions that they have.
Yep, thanks, Mike. So we're just going to kind of go through, as Mike said, kind of the biggest things I think that we want you to take away today, and then lean into all of the other training and the things that we've got available so that you can get really comfortable with all of this. So as we all know, the NAR settlement changes are essentially effective as of August 17th, 2024. So again, keeping in mind the old way of doing business, and we're moving into the new way of doing business. What I want to touch on, Tom and I have broken it up. I'm going to focus on the listing side of things and the changes that we're making to the exclusive sales and marketing agreement, or, fundamentally our listing agreement. So the first thing that I want to talk a bit about is that we are increasing the listing agreement fee from $4.95 to $5.95. Again, we looked across the board at everything and wanted to make sure that we were really smart and thoughtful about how to approach things, being able to minimize any impact to all of you, but while also making sure, as Mike had said, just making sure that we're continuing to offer the same level of service to you that you are then able to pass on to your clients. This is also an opportunity right now for us to set a new normal practice. What we also have to recognize is things have changed over the last few years for us, right? One thing we've talked a lot about, I've talked to a lot of agents about, is just the fact of what's happening in our economy. That inflation is occurring and that things are costing more. And we thought this was a smart and reasonable move to adjust this from $4.95 to $5.95 when sitting down and talking with your sellers. So in the listing agreement, you will see that change. What you are also going to see is that we're offering 3 different listing agreements for you to be able to use, depending on your approach and how you like to, sit down and talk with your clients. We are going to have them pre-printed with either a 3.5% listing fee, a 4% listing fee, or a 4.5% listing fee. And again, we know many of you operate your business differently in what you like to do and how you like to approach sitting down and talking with your clients. And what we are going to allow is the opportunity for you to adjust down to a minimum commission of 3% on the listing side. Okay. So you will see those changes, and those listing agreements will be made available to you. The other thing that we want you to make sure of and are comfortable of is where these changes are in the listing agreement. So the first change you're going to see in section 4A, this is the brokerage commission. So as I mentioned, the $5.95 fee, and what you're seeing here is an excerpt of what you'll see for a 3.5% listing commission. The other thing that is really important to note is that in the listing agreement, change number 2 is how we speak about when there is a situation of no agency, which means that there is a buyer that is coming to you direct without an agent, and the situation of dual agency. And that is, if a buyer isn't represented or the seller authorizes dual agency, the brokerage commission shall be 5%. And we felt like that is, really important to put in there, because you all know that when you are representing both the seller and the buyer, there is a lot more work that goes into getting the deal to the finish line. And I would say there's probably even more work that happens when we are working with a buyer who isn't represented, right? Who really doesn't understand what it's going to take to be able to purchase this property. And there is a lot relying on you as the listing agent to make sure that this is handled professionally and in the best interest to making sure your seller gets what they need in order to have a successful transaction. So you will see those changes in the listing agreement. You're also going to see this, which we actually found in the CAR forms that they most recently changed. And we really liked the language in there. And we thought it was a nice opportunity to further protect your client, the seller, by letting them know about buyer love letters. We all know what those are, right? Especially in a competitive environment, when we've got people who might be sending letters that could disclose something related to them being a member of a protected class. And we want to make sure that a seller can avoid any compromise down the road, because we all know that a receipt of any of this information could expose them to claims in the future. So this is merely a disclosure that you can talk to them about, that they can sign off on, and then they can make the decision as to whether or not they are interested in even receiving them when it comes time to receiving offers. And then
Amy, I want to jump in because we, even though we said, please don't use the chat, we're getting crushed in the chat.
Okay.
But I've noted just a couple of quick, and I'm going to try, but we may not be able to answer all your chat questions. So please just send them in afterwards if you don't get them answered. Someone asked about a 3% agreement. We're not going to do a 3% agreement. We're just allowing you to be able to strike it, the 3.5, just like we have 6% agreements and everyone just strikes them to go to 5. Someone asked about open houses. Open houses are allowed. They view them differently. So people coming through open houses, you don't have to have agreements with before they walk into the house. There were questions about, do we need new agreements as of August 17th? No, you don't. Any of the old agreements, we know we're going to have to bleed them out. We understand that we're going to have some flex on the commissions and the old agreements. So don't worry about that. Anything currently signed right now, whether it's on the market or not, people asked about the fee. The new fee only kicks in for new agreements being signed going forward after August 17th. So anything from the past or anything that you even signed off on now that you aren't going to list for a few weeks or whatever, we're not making anyone go back and try to go and get new agreements. So just so everyone knows, everyone's current agreements are totally fine. We're going to honor them. It's going to take a few months to kind of bleed through it.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Sorry, I don't have it up right now.
No, I'm kind of watching it. I just don't know I'll be able to get to all of them, but
Okay.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, the questions so far, thank you, by the way, because I've only seen good ones. The only thing I want to add is, like, if you're thinking and you come up with questions, a lot of my conversations last month, the question can be solved when you understand that the biggest ramification from this, the consequence here, is zero procuring cause. If you start understanding there's no such thing as procuring cause anymore, it eliminates about 80% of the confusion on exactly what to do and how to do it. There's no such thing as procuring cause. The seller's not responsible, and there's no obligation to compensate an agent that brings a customer through a listing. All that goes away. You could have the same customer walk through the same listing with 3 different agents, and it doesn't matter, because there's no such thing as procuring cause anymore.
Yep. I mean, it's going to be great for us in the long term, certainly.
Yes.
You know, we just have to it's the new norm. So the last piece on this listing agreement, change number 4, that I think is incredibly important, and it was based off of a lot of feedback from the managing brokers, is a section in there for any additional provisions. So again, you know, sometimes there's certain circumstances where something needs to be agreed upon. There's now an actual spot for that within the listing agreement. It's section 22, and you'll see that in the new forms. So the other thing that I want to cover as it relates to the listing agreement, and one of the new things that we put together for all of you, is a compensation addendum to the listing agreement. Because one of the things that we want you to note is that in the new listing agreement, where I just pointed out the 4 largest changes or the 4 changes, is we are also taking out in the listing agreement a spot where you talk about buyer broker compensation. Because again, this is the new norm. As you're sitting down with a seller, you are focusing on what your compensation needs are as the listing agent. And that is as the listing agent. And if they have a buyer's agent, okay. But then you're also talking about in the event that you're a dual agent or have somebody who isn't represented on the other side, what your compensation needs are, right? So we're focusing solely on your needs within the listing agreement. Now, we know that some of you might say, but what if my seller does want to compensate or put something out there for a buyer's broker as compensation? What we've done is we've created an addendum that allows you to do that. So this is the addendum. I know it's not super easy to read, but there is a copy of it that you will be able to take a look at. And what I wanted to focus on were the most important things in this compensation addendum and really sort of what to know. First off, this is an optional addendum because one of the things that we have to start thinking about as we get into this new world is our immediate reaction, because this is what it's been as we've held 5% and 6%, and we have chosen to talk with our sellers about offering proactively a cooperating compensation. Cooperating compensation is ultimately going away, that term co-op, right? And so what we need to recognize is that when we move forward and we talk with a seller, we don't necessarily want to talk to them about coming up with a compensation that we should be offering the buyer's broker. The reason why is because we're trying to get the best terms for our seller, right? So one of the things we want to think about is why tell them to offer something out. Instead, in this new world, now what we're going to see is if they receive offers from a buyer, the odds are these buyers, and if they're getting multiple offers, are going to see the request for compensation, right? Because a buyer is now going to be requesting the seller compensate their buyer in this their buyer broker in this new world. So as opposed to having our seller decide before we even know what the landscape looks like with buyers, what we are encouraging you to think about is just leave it open to see what happens. However, some sellers may want to be able to offer something. And so this addendum gives that opportunity. So it's an optional addendum that allows them to be proactive about compensation. It also allows the seller to authorize you as the agent to be able to notify a buyer's broker or a buyer's agent of this compensation. And then the last thing to keep in mind is that if a seller has offered this, but a buyer and a buyer's agent present an offer where their request for compensation in the purchase contract is lower than what the seller has put in this addendum, it is only the responsibility on the seller to pay what is finally negotiated in the purchase contract. So I hope that makes sense. But even if they agree to something here, the reality is whatever truly gets negotiated at the time of contract is what is moved forward with. So again, this is something that we know some agents may use. It may actually be something in the future people use when it's less of a seller's market and sellers want to be more competitive in the future. But this is an opportunity to still be able to offer a compensation to a buyer's agent if the seller would like to.
So one thing that came up in the chat was co-ops in the MLS for current listing agreements. As of August 17th, there is no ability to offer any kind of cooperating commission in the MLS. It is gone. It is strictly not allowed. And there is not going to be any cute way of working around it because that's what the Department of Justice is looking for. And there's also been questions before about, are we going to participate in any of these websites that are offering compensation? And the answer is no, we are not going to participate in that because the messaging that we've gotten, I talked to the CEO of the Chicago Association, who's been very involved with a lot of the discussions with the DOJ and with NAR, is that the DOJ is looking to see if brokers try to work around these rules. They do not want this stuff out there. So for us, we're not trying to buck the system. We're just trying to adapt to what we think the new normal is. And the reality is, even if you say there's an offer of compensation out there, because there's no procuring cause in co-op, it doesn't matter unless you get it in writing. That's why it's just best to do it when you write the contract, because otherwise you literally have to call the 15 people you're going and showing properties to and get each one of them to send you something in writing, dictating the co-op, and then you got to enforce it. It is just easier and better, and you're much more assured of getting paid if you just negotiate it. You're going to have it in the buyer brokerage agreement, just negotiate it at the table. It's happening in every deal in Indiana, and it has not been a big deal.
Yeah, just to add to that too, is that, you know, in some states, they've had the buyer agreement into the contract. I personally think that will end up being the solution. Right now, we have an addendum. Even when it comes to associations, there's going to be this period, call it a dysfunction, where people are trying to figure out the best practices. But when you think about it logically, at the end of the day, if there's a sales contract and somebody types in the purchase price of the home, and then they put in the buyer brokerage fee and they total it, that solves all the problems. That's the way it's going to be handled with finance, because that way both sides of the commission will be financed as they have always been. The only one comment I just want to recognize that's not okay that I saw in the chat that somebody put is that effectively, if someone's unrepresented, can you charge them like a showing fee or something to show the house? I do want to remind you of your fiduciary responsibilities to your seller to get the home sold. So adding any hurdles for personal compensation at the expense of exposure to the listing would not be okay. But I appreciate the creative thinking.
And again, like this question, there is not going to be any co-op field on the MLS. It doesn't matter what your listing agreements say. As of August 17th, the field is gone, and they will be policing it, meaning you can't do it cute in the comments or try to do it in code. Someone said they were going to put like an apple or something like that in their comments, or so they're going to be looking for this stuff. It's not going to be worth it. It is just much easier to just deal with it when they negotiate it. Someone also actually asked about tax advantages to offer or not offer a comp. That's a question for their accountant. I would not get in any kind of tax advice. So just so we're clear.
Yeah, there are going to be companies, there are going to be agents that long for the way it used to be handled, right? It's very hard for some people to implement change. I will tell you, in this industry, and effectively every industry, when there is a change that's applied by the government, you lean in, you act fast, you are prepared, and you accelerate through your competition that is unprepared. That's the only thing to do. Kind of trying to block it, change it, go with it, sneak around it. Those are not good decisions.
Okay.
Okay, then.
So Tom, do we want to move on to, I think it's the buy side?
Yeah,
Some good news.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is some good news here.
I thought all this was good news. Hold on.
It is
I'm
all
waiting
good
for the bad. I thought like, hold on.
Better news.
What's
Yeah,
the
well,
bad news so far today? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, and I guess I just wanted to also say there's so many questions coming in the chat now. Because we've started answering, and I just want
Yeah, I mean, so we're not going to be able to keep up with the questions. Honestly, they're coming in too fast now. So we'll do our best, but really, if you don't get your questions answered, please send them to Amy, to Tom. We'll put them together. Most of these are actually being answered in the FAQs. We're just trying to be proactive, but it's getting to be too difficult. So I apologize.
Yeah, so, and I think one of the things that we wanted to think is there's some really good questions there that are nuanced. So there's also going to be a ton of training coming on, and these questions are coming in the training we've already seen. So we will be addressing these, and they're really good questions and they're big ones. So we do recognize that it's critical, but we will be hitting these in all of our training, and some of the offices have already started that. So yeah, so we can get into the buyer broker agreement. There is some good news with this. There's like we talked about, there's good news across the board, but not all of it. You know, we also recognize, I don't want to be glib and say that this is all great news. I will say that this is a change, and it's going to be something that we all have to lean into a little bit and support each other on. So the exclusive buyer broker agreement, we have 2 agreements that are available, 3%, 3.5. Just like the listing agreement, you can stripe through this if you need to. We're not taking anything, but we really want 2.5. But I just want to kind of go over the differences on what's already out there, right? So these are the differences on what you've seen currently. And for those of us that have been using them, I will say this too, it's something we had to use in the past, and Amy and I did, gosh, maybe it was 2 months ago, Amy, we did perfect buyer strategies, and there is a great opportunity if you go onto the shared, onto Ad Academy to look at a good way to get this implemented into your buyer broker meeting that you have as you have your buyer strategy meetings. So take a look at that if you feel uncomfortable. I think a lot of people have looked at it, felt better about how to do that. So I just wanted to put a plug in for that as well. So yeah, there are 2 that are available. We'll be starting 8/17. There is a buyer. So just like we have the buyer broker or the listing agreement, and we have that meeting, we have our buyer meeting and we go through that. We are now implementing a fee of $495. That fee, if you think about it, is exactly what you would have been paying in the past because we had an MLS fee. Remember, it always said 2.5 minus 495 or where you'd see that. That fee is now being paid to At Properties. We still need to collect that. It's the exact same fee that you've seen before. I'm going to skip just a tiny bit ahead to the 4th bullet and then we'll come back to it. But what that allows us to do is do away with the $200 buy-side transaction fee that At Properties has always had. They will still get the kits. They'll still be receiving their reward for having worked with us, but that fee is going away. So it goes from basically fundamentally you were paying $695 if you think about it. You had $495 minus the $200, just roughly. Now that $200 fee is going away.
Because let's remember pretty much every buyer transaction you did, and this is in Illinois because this is just an Illinois issue. Every transaction you did in Illinois, it was whatever the compensation was, 2.5%, 3%, whatever was being offered minus $495. So we're basically getting rid of that $200 buyer fee, but continuing to take the $495 like we did before, so that we can continue to provide the same level of service, all of the resources, everything that we provide to you guys.
Yeah, and just thinking about this is the other thing that this for the first time does now, though I would say this about all of the forms. Every form we're talking about today allows you to have a lot more control over your own business. So there is some big differences here. So these things allow us to wrap our business around how the form works. So if you would like to pass this on, the $495 to your clients, and some agents like to do that, you now can. So you're actually doing away with all fees available. If you don't want to do that and you want to continue to pay for $495, you can do that as well. So there's no change to you on how that works in that perspective. But for those that like to operate, the way you do, then you have the option to do that. I don't know if we can go to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what some of the differences are too. So in this, we've added a little bit more language around the fact that this buyer is only working with you. So the buyer has no current brokerage agreement with any other broker. They can only choose one person to do this. So this is going to help with, with your ability to incur or ensure that there's nobody else working with that agent. We can go to the next slide. This is something that was new too.
On the buyer brokerage agreement, yes. You can strike it to 2.5%, by the way. That was the question that came up, and I think we said that it's 3% is our ask, but 2.5% is our standard.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the compensation itself, I really like this one a lot. So how many of you worked with buyers, and I've done this many times, where we work with a buyer, and this is the only industry I know of where this kind of happens. I worked for free for 2 years. And then at the very end of the deal, they decide that their brother who just got their license should be the person to write the offer. And it's super, super frustrating. We work for free so many times. And it's probably one of the worst parts about working with buyers is this weird dance that we do that I'm going to do everything I can to prove how good I am. And you can still break up with me for no, for no reason whatsoever. You found out I snore and now you're gone, right? So that this is kind of getting right with this. And so if you would like, and again, this is optional, and if you run your business the way that you run it, these forms are again giving you a lot more power. You can say, look, I'd like a retainer fee of $2,000 or $1,000, $500 to actually just to cover the time that we're going to be going out together. At the end of that, this will be deducted from my 2.5% or 3 or 4, whatever you're going to be charging your client, but this will be deducted from that. And so you've been able to have a retainer that at least allows you to feel comfortable that you're being covered for the time that you're spending with someone. The good news on that is then it's deducted from the 2.5 at the end. So there's no harm, no foul. They'll be paying the same amount as if they were doing somebody else, but this just gives you a lot more control of your own business. We go
Yeah,
to the-
I love this. We talked about this on Accelerate, this upcoming month, or this past Monday with Anam, who was like, I think I'm gonna start charging a retainer fee. So now there's a spot for you and your team and everybody else.
If I could just chime in too, just a reminder, I was with an agent last night. I let them know, I said, hey, here's what we're doing tomorrow, so you're aware. This agent has never once paid the $4.95 fee, never once. And I also know agents that have never once not paid for it, that literally do a presentation, strike the 6 to 5 and say, I'm paying this fee before the seller even asks. I just recommend all of you getting what you're worth or reviewing it in video one more time and giving it a shot, and not just striking it and not just absorbing costs and not feeling like you're overpaid, that you have to, give away money. Because for the majority of the consumers, 82.4%, according to that, they appreciate what you do and they value it and they're willing to pay for your service. You just need to appreciate yourself and value yourself and allow them to pay. Think of all the people that you pay what they ask, and that won't be a problem. And then now this is great, in my opinion, because when I was a buyer's agent, I was relegated to whatever the seller was willing to comp, right? And there are some that the seller comped less than 2.5, less than 3 back in the day. And you got what you got. This is so much better. And it also gives you the same chance of what you studied with getting what you're worth and meeting with buyers to go for 3%, go for 3.5%, go for whatever it is you think you're worth. Be the agent that knows you have the value and ask for it. And they will commit to it. And if they don't commit to it, you'll have a professional conversation about value, and you'll learn a lot about their mindset and what they're willing to pay for. And they might not be someone you're willing to work with. Sometimes it's better to set a fee and work with fewer people than race to the bottom and compete with somebody else that's willing to charge less just to get that one client.
Sorry.
There are a lot of anxiety, but I think a lot of us in the discussion feel like this is not only good for the industry, but it's good for you.
Absolutely.
And so a couple of quick things. Anyone, again, so someone said about existing buyer brokerage agreements. No, we're not making people re-sign new agreements, buyer or listing agreements. Rentals are not affected by this. There's no change on the rental fee side. There's no change on rentals, although what we've been told in Illinois anyway, as of January 1st, it looks like if you're working with a renter or if you're a commercial broker working with a client, you are going to have a representation agreement signed. Just like you have to have a buyer brokerage agreement if you're working with someone looking to buy. Illinois is changing the law here that's going to require tenants to sign something as well as anything on the commercial side. So that's going to be a change that's coming. We're getting more information on it, but it is, from what I understand, it's actually been passed. It's just it won't actually go into effect till January 1st.
Yeah, and I think
and also there's a question about retainers. Retainers are commissions. They're part of the commissions that you receive. And you can take a retainer and it can be credited against whatever the commission that you've agreed to. But any retainers you take are still commissions that flow through at properties.
Absolutely. And I think that the biggest thing to think about just this section to be just the brokerage, just thinking about how you're getting paid now, this for all of us is the most important part, because this is actually where our payment is located as buyers, as buyer reps. This is where the payment is located. So we can talk about co-ops, which, as Mike said, we have to drop that whole viewpoint because there is no co-op. But even if somebody's offering compensation, this supersedes what's happening. So this has to be your focus on everything that you're doing. So in the past, we were always asking the question, how much are they paying out? That's eventually, we will lose that completely from our vernacular. This is the focus of where you get paid, and this is where you have control over your own destiny. So we just have to really feel comfortable with this part of it. There's, like I said, there's not going to be any kind of co-op available. I mean, there will be compensation that people can offer, but this will supersede everything. So we just have to be really clear about that.
And really, what we're trying to do on both the buy and the list side is we're trying to give you the opportunity to have the seller or buyer pay the fee. And that doesn't mean that fee couldn't be negotiated in the process of negotiating the contract on the buy side in the contract process. So, and if you can get them to pay it, that's a fee. It does come to at properties, but it's not like a commission and then on top of it, you'd have to pay it again. So if you can get the buyer to pay it or get the seller to pay it in the commission process, you would have no fee, as Tom noted.
So that's the buyer rep agreement, which we have to have signed in order for this next form to work, because in order to do the addendum to the purchase contract, which everybody will be doing, and some people have already started. One person actually in my office used it already for sale by owner, which was an sort of an unlikely way to use this, but it worked out really well. So they just were able to tie their compensation to this, which I thought was very creative. So I'm glad people are really leaning into this. But in general, everything going forward is going to be based on this addendum to the purchase agreement contract and to the purchase contract. The thing that's super important about this is probably the only way we're going to really be able to be paid as well. So this puts the onus on the seller and the buyer to be able to have this happen at closing. And I think Mike has said this really well in the past, but I think once we get past closing, and that has taken place, we do not have the possibility of putting a lien on a property. This is the only thing that allows us to get paid. So if we have the buyer broker agreement, we have this attached to the addendum, this will happen at closing. The title company will have both sides of it, and this allows us to create the contract to get paid. It's really important. So the things to know about this is that the provisions for this are going to take control over everything that's taking place. So what we put in here is what dictates how we get paid. One of the things that can take place about this, I think we've mentioned it in the past, is whatever the lower number is. So if we don't sign our buyer broker agreement at 3.5 and we've agreed to, we've put this in here, the lower of the two is going to be what prevails. So we want to make sure that we've got that filled up properly on both sides. And I will say we've said this a few times. In practice, we've already seen this happen in Indiana. And Candace Taylor and everybody that's out in Indiana has done an amazing job on this, as being sort of the leaders through this process. They're now, about 7 weeks into this. And what we found is that it's just become so much easier for everybody to just go through the process. They get their offers, they see everything that's there, even in multiple offers. I heard Andra and a couple other people had asked that in the chat. Now you've got everything in front of you. You can lay it out and kind of determine how you're going to go forward. Nobody's calling and asking what the co-op is anymore, because like we said, there is no co-op. They're not even asking anymore.
And this question has come up: is do we think most sellers are going to offer a co-op? We think that you're going to need to have that conversation with your seller up front. You're going to need to lay that groundwork that is going to be asked for, but we do not think most sellers are going to proactively offer a compensation, because that's just what's happening in Indiana, is that you have to lay the groundwork and set the foundation that they're going to be asked to pay the commission. And but they're almost every agent is saying, just put it in writing and we'll figure it out in the offer, because in the end, it's just a net number to the seller. The seller, it's like anything else. They set the price and then they factor in all the things they need to pay. And then they say, okay, I'm comfortable with this net. It's just going to be a net dollar amount to the seller. It's just more transparent now, exactly what the buyer's broker is getting. But it's just much easier to negotiate it, because otherwise, even if you tell them what the co-op is, really, you got to put it in writing in order for it to be collectible. So putting it in writing in the contract process is the cleanest, easiest way to make sure you get paid.
And when you explain it to the seller, you can remind the seller that, in essence, the buyer is always paying both fees, because they're coming to the table with the cash, but the buyer is paying the buy side of the commission. It's added on or it's included in the price, but they are actually doing it. And when you look at it in all these other questions, you can see why. The list side was always so professional. You had a presentation, they selected an agent, they had a timeline agreement, they paid a fee, very professional, like other industries. When you think about it and you step back, the buy side for our industry was really unprofessional. There was no commitment by the consumer. The greatest thing is it was bizarre in comparison to other industries. There is going to be a change period, and I'm not saying there's not anxiety associated with that. I would have some. But this is so much more professional to make a real regulated industry out of both sides, valuing the buy side of it as much as the sell side of it. It also makes it, think about the Zillow lead that would come to the agent that just showed up that had no clue, and now they would show the house to the Zillow lead. The Zillow lead wouldn't even have any idea who they're seeing. And because of procuring cause, that agent that paid for that Zillow lead would get the co-op. Think about that and just step back a little bit on how strange that is when you think of other industries. So it's hard, and I get it's scary, but try to embrace it, because it does make a lot of sense.
I think the other thing that was really of note is that a lot of people were very nervous when we started to do this in Indiana, as well as what we've been talking about, is that some people offer a 0% co-op. And it makes us very nervous as agents to be in a position like that. But what's happened in reality is when you just find they can offer, we're going to talk about a 0, or they're not going to sign that addendum now. When the offers start coming in, they all have this attachment. Almost every single time that so far what we've seen has been they end up paying it. So they see they see the offer, they see everything there, they're looking at the net, and they go ahead and pay the difference. So even if they're telling you they're not paying it, just be aware that in practice, what's happening is they're ending up paying it. So almost exclusively.
And Tom, can I just put one point of clarification? Because there are a couple of people who have asked this about the responsibility is to pay the lesser of the fee. So I think what we want to recognize is that if, let's say, a seller is offering 3% co-op, right? That's what they've decided or have written down, even if they are offering anything, a compensation. And a buyer's agent has a brokerage agreement that says they are looking to receive 2.5%. And in the written contract, they add this purchase contract, and they're asking their buyer's agent to be paid 2.5%. Even if the seller offered something higher at 3%, the buyer's agent can only take what is in their contract.
Right.
So just some like clarity or kind of confusion. So, and it's really whatever's put in the purchase contract and they ask for and gets negotiated in this contract, that really sort of supersedes everything. Because all commissions are truly negotiable, especially during this piece of the purchase contract. So whatever gets agreed upon at the time of this negotiation and signed off on is what they will move forward with. So just to provide clarity.
Just one, because we didn't really address it, but I see some really good questions. One was, are we still encouraging buyers to sign the agreements to pay even if they do not have the funds to pay, hoping they can negotiate it with the seller? Remember that in Indiana, and the only way you're going to get paid is if you're compensated, for most cases, is when the compensation is a part of the purchase contract, because that way it comes from the proceeds of the sale. Super important. So if a buyer doesn't have the cash outside the down payment, for instance, and you negotiate a contract, it's just important that the price includes the buyer commission. That's why I say is a lot of this is semantics. It's always been paid by the buyer who shows up with the cash, but it doesn't have to be paid outside. It needs to be a part of that contract, especially for it to be financed. Also, there was a good one from Phil, and this is interesting, where it's is that property is going to enforce buyer brokerage agreements when the buyer goes and writes an offer with a different agent last minute. So again, these are these rogue buyers. Thankfully, it's not the majority, and it's not, even double digits, but you will have these buyers that don't value anything they signed or the commitment. And now that there's no procuring cause and you can't lien a property pre-closing for commission, that's an interesting question, is are we going to have our in-house counsel getting ready to go after individual buyers? That is the problem that comes from this without procuring cause that we're going to have to solve. And we are in that area, and Mike can chime in too, where we don't really know exactly how we're going to deal with that. But a brokerage firing out lots of lawsuits to buyers trying to get them paid is not a good look when it comes to your communication strategy.
Well, beyond that too, it's just not practical. You can't sue someone for $10,000 or $15,000. You'll eat up legal fees before you even get in a court. The system doesn't work very well that way. The key is to make sure you put the title company on notice. So if you know someone you have a buyer agreement with someone, and you got to do your best to find out what they're buying and when they're closing. If we put the title company on notice, they can't close the transaction without paying us or providing insurance over it, which means we could still get paid by it. So this is the one area that's going to be a little bit dicey if people do try to work around you. It's one we're going to have to watch. We're going to figure out the position we're going to take. We are going to, in the end, we are going to step up and make sure we defend your rights and defend your compensation. We'll do what we need to do that, but it's a conversation, because something that becomes a practical reality. We do not think this is going to be anything that's prevalent, but it is definitely something that's going to happen.
I think the thing that's so critical here is that when you are in a really competitive market, knowing that there are not a lot of properties and you might be in multiple, I can't encourage you enough to sit down with your buyer And if, you're working with your proper rate lender, they have so many scenarios and they talk the buyer through all of them. So that in the instance that we don't want to pass commission through the purchase contract, there are ways to structure the loan. If they're putting 20% down, and they need to absorb the 2.5 or 3%, they show them the modeling of what it would be if their down payment was 17.5%, and they use that 2.5 to be able to pay their buyer's broker. And oftentimes it is a cost of maybe an additional, depending on the loan amount, $30, $40 in their monthly payment. So just so important to get out ahead of the game with that. You got to sit down and say, let's talk through these scenarios before we find the house we're going to fall in love with, before we get into a competitive situation. Really encouraged. To me, this is one of the biggest changes when working with a buyer. It isn't just, hey, make sure you're pre-approved. It's let's sit down with your lender. Let's talk about this strategy and all of the different possibilities so we know what your options are. Really critical.
And there was a question about, is this an ironclad contract and enforcement? So the reality is this is a contract just like a listing contract. There's no difference at this point. So yes, it is ironclad, it is enforceable. But let's say you sell a house and you have a listing agreement and it gets taken off the market, and then the seller goes and sells it and doesn't tell you about it, and it closes. It's the same situation. It's just a lot harder for a seller to do that these days because usually they have to list with someone else. But again, if someone goes and signs a bunch of buyer brokerage agreements, there is no way for us to technically monitor it because there's no way to know what they buy unless you are staying in touch with them, or at least being aware of what they're doing and what they buy. I don't think this is going to be something that's going to be very prevalent. I think people are going to respect the contracts because you can legally enforce them if you find out after the fact. As Thad said, suing them is a possibility. But again, if it's a $10,000 commission or $15,000 commission, you're going to spend multiples of that trying to enforce it. So it becomes a practical issue. I don't think it's going to be much of an issue, but I do think it's something we have to be aware of. And the only way we can enforce it as of right now is to make sure the title company is on notice up front. Now, things could change. There are states where you can lien a property for a brokerage commission. So you could potentially lien a property. That is not the case in Illinois right now. I don't know if that's going to change or not. There's discussions about it, but there's been no clarity yet.
Last thing to say about this, I'm just seeing questions in there, but yeah, can we get something in writing that shows us the different approaches to using our buyers?
Yes.
We'll have all of these things available, and they're going to go. So as Amy said, Proper Rate has been working really closely on developing some programs that are really terrific, frankly, on depending on how much money you're putting down in your down payment, you can actually leverage some of that towards the commission so that it's actually covered in that. So there'll be more and more products and services as well as approaches to this, and we'll continue to keep a running list of them.
Yeah, and just to wrap with that, I would say a resounding yes to just about every question in the chat. We have either thought of it, we already have a solution for it, or we're planning on coaching on it and making sure you get comfortable. So feel free to certainly keep asking the questions. Either, you can send them to me, but reach out to your managing brokers. Because we have been talking about a lot of these scenarios, exactly the questions that you're, asking here. The other thing that I will tell you is that on platform, we have an entire NAR settlement resources section, and we're continuing to add to it. What you'll find on there is we've got a great letter to your buyers that explains to them the changes that are taking place. You can take that letter, you can make it your own, you can convert it into an email to be able to start explaining to your buyers these changes that are taking effect. We've done the same thing for your sellers. So we've really tried to give you as many of the tools that we know you're going to need in these upcoming weeks and months. To Mike and Thad's point, we're going to continue to stay nimble. We want your feedback. If there is something we don't have for you yet, our goal is then to get it to you. So make sure that you're checking out that settlement tab in platform, because it is going to have a lot of that information. We're also going to be rolling out And I think Tom might just run through this before we wrap, but there are going to be some office and regional opportunities to kind of talk through this again with your managing brokers. And that's both in Illinois, but I also know George in Michigan is planning on talking specifically in Michigan about, a lot of this applies in the other states, but there are some nuances in Michigan that he will address. Don will address some of the nuances that he is working on in Wisconsin with his agents up there. I know that Candace has already done an incredible job and is going to continue to offer support and resourcing for all of our agents who are in Indiana. But Tom, I don't know if you want to just offer up where agents can tap into in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, so you bet. So as we said, I think Don started in July with the Wisconsin forms because they went a little bit earlier. So shout out there. And then George spoke this week in Michigan, and I think they're going to continue to do that. Candace started July 1st. So we have a lot of things happening there. If you are in the city, or even if you're not in the city and you have not seen the virtual sales meeting that Rick, Rachel, George, and Paul did, you need to look at it. It's really, really good. It's a lot. It digs into the details and they answer a lot of the questions that are going on there. So it's an incredible resource.
There's a link to it on the NAR settlement resource page already. So there is a link to that meeting.
Right. And then the North Shore, we've got, Carrie, Jorge, Don, Sandra, me, we've got a series of things that we've been doing. We've already started there. There'll be more coming up this week. I know Winnekas is on Monday. So we'll continue to do that. And this is where we're digging into a lot of these questions and really doing some role playing. The Northwest suburbs with Lisa, Stephanie, Sandra, and Vince, they've started this week. So they were kind of guinea pigs up here on how we're working that out. We've gotten some really good feedback and making sure that we address those things. And then in the Western suburbs, Trisha, Jackie, Denise, Jim, they have a big one coming up next week, an all company meeting that we've all digging in on this as well. So everybody's been working really, really hard to make this work. Your managing brokers are a super good resource for this because they've been right in the thick of it. And we've played out every one of the scenarios that we've seen in your chat, the questions that you've got in the chat. So all of these things have been really addressed. So that's where you can really dig into this a little bit further.
I feel like we haven't had a big advantage by being able to roll this out in Indiana a month ago. And hats off to Candace, who did a phenomenal job, the managing broker there. But I feel like, we might be a little bit more at ease because we've been through it there. And it worked and everything is going well. There's always some little bit of confusion and nuance, but the agents there are doing a phenomenal job and it's succeeding. Also, I saw a great comment and getting the testimonials, the endorsement letters from the buy side. I don't know if Amy, if you can answer that. If we didn't think of that, we'll flick that switch because that's a great idea.
I believe we have that in motion. We already
awesome.
I don't know if it's in play, yes, but yes, we will be doing that.
Cool.
And we will be doing buyer brokerage commission statements. We will be doing it for every buyer deal. You'll have to submit for them like you do on the listing side. You have to give them our contract admin notice in order for them to produce it. It'll be a little more of a manual process for contract admin right now. We don't have it programmed in, mostly because people don't usually put the buyer's information in early enough. If we can get people to do that, we'll be able to adapt that as well. And there was also a question about offering a co-op. It's fine if your seller said they're not going to offer a co-op. It's also fine to say, just, ask for anything you want in writing. It's just like a seller of a buyer wanting the couch or a light fixture. They can ask for anything. If they want to ask for the compensation to be paid, even if the seller says they won't pay, they can ask for it. And then it's about the price and either they'll accept it or not. It's like any other negotiation. So do not be afraid to tell your buyers that regardless, buyers may say, well, don't show me anything that no one's going to cooperate. Someone's not going to offer compensation on. You won't know until you get to the table. So I think you should encourage your buyers to look and then just put in their best offer and ask for it. And if the seller won't pay it, it's just like if the seller won't accept the price that someone's asking, there's no different.
Yeah, inevitably it is a price issue, right? The price is the price is the price. It is always included a buy side and a seller and a list side commission. So if they say the seller won't pay the buyer co-op, that's just semantics again, is that the price is too low. That's all that means.
The last thing I'll say too on my side of this is that, as an agent, we all work as individual, we are the CEOs of our own companies. We're all independent contractors. And I think Brad said it in here, and I just love this. This is our best opportunity. And this is how we started this whole conversation on how to give yourself a raise. Because the reality is things have gotten more expensive. So everything has gone up. And the only way as independent contractors that we can run our business a little bit more efficiently is by getting a raise, is by doing this the way we're talking about. So getting what you're worth, really thinking about the fees structures that we're working on is the best way to really increase your value and increase what you get paid.
Yep. And if
So
all
you'll-
of you know me extraordinarily well, I like to wrap with some positive energy and usually a quote or two. It's the coach in me. I can't help it. I found this at about 11:30 at night. But I just loved it because I think we are in this world right now where I feel like as a team and as a group, we've got this. We're in such a solid place. Yes, there's going to be things that we kind of have to learn and bumps that we might run into, but I really feel like we are in just such a great opportunity to not just survive, but to thrive. And I think, I've already talked to managing brokers who have said agents from other firms are calling them as it's getting closer to the 17th to say, I don't really feel like I'm ready for this. And again, you don't know until we get there, but I feel like we're really ready for this. And I just want us all to know that if we believe it's going to work out, which it is, we're going to see all the opportunity in front of us. And if we believe it won't, we're going to see the obstacles. And, I don't see obstacles. Yes, there's going to be challenges. It's not going to be perfect. But what I love most is that we've got this community right here. And it's never let us down before. So I think we are, need to stay strong together. We need to communicate. You need to share with us if there are things that you need in order to be competitive, to navigate. That's what we're here for. But we're also here to be at the front of the line to lead you through this. So I want you to say that we're here with you. And, we probably have our nerves too, but overall, I think we're really excited to kind of rip this Band-Aid off and let's get August 17th going and let's get into the new world of real estate. So was that motivating enough? I think I did a good
I'm
job.
there, Amy. That was
Brandy
great.
Isaac said, LFG, baby.
Yes. This is actually a good thing. That's so funny. It's like how many things in life present themselves as being challenges or negative or just because they're different, but they end up being amazing life enhancers. And I think this is an amazing business enhancer, and it brings a lot of professionalism and legitimacy to 50% of the transaction. I like that. I like to compete when it comes to professionalism and legitimacy any day of the week. So everybody else should too. Anybody who doesn't want to has a bad reason, and they should be the ones you want to compete against.
That's right. Well,
Well, thank you
have
all, and a
great
huge
weekend.
thank you to Amy and Tom for all the heavy lifting on this, organizing all of this, and all of the managing brokers. All of you guys have been doing a tremendous job working with your teams. I know we've already had a bunch of meetings with some of the offices, and you're going to be having office meetings over the next week. Forms will be out there on August 12th on platform. We are ready to go. So we're going to hit this one together, and we're going to make this a huge positive for us and for the industry. So we're excited.
All right. Thanks, team. We'll have this recap out to you this afternoon with forms and FAQs. So keep an eye out. We'll see you soon.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.